Rick Hale, Associate Professor, Aerospace Engineering, Center for Remote Sensing of Ice Sheets, developing sensors, developing platforms for remote sensing in Greenland and Antarctica. Started 5 years ago with a preliminary planning study for what if we replaced the manned aircraft with unmanned aircraft to do the same mission, give us a little range scalability, a little temporal scalability, and take the pilots out of harm's way. That planning study showed, yes, we should in fact look at uninhabited aircraft, and we started designing it. It was designed at KU, built at KU. We've spent the last 3 years then, well, a good year, working with the scientists on what are the mission specifications, working with the sensor technology folks on how far can you miniaturize, how much can you lightweight the structures and sensors, and then designing an aircraft around that. We would have liked to procure an aircraft, but there just wasn't really one available for the low altitude, reasonably long endurance mission that we're talking about. We are now in ground test and flight test phase.
My name is Bill Donovan, and I am the chief designer of the Meridian. I'm a doctoral student in Aerospace Engineering. Friday we went out for our first flight of the Meridian. We started the day with doing a lot of taxi testing, just running the airplane up and down the runway, making sure all the systems were still working. All the new wiring that we did, the changes we made were still functional. Got through all of that and then got approval to fly, and so then we took off and did our maiden voyage and got the airplane around the pattern a couple times and then landed. This is one of the bigger UAVs out there, especially maybe the biggest UAV developed by a university, almost for sure. It's a 26-foot wingspan, 1,100-pound airplane, so it's the size of a small two-passenger airplane, and so it's a very real aircraft that can carry a very real payload and can fly for a very real distance. And so just that first flight of getting it off the ground, we've never done anything this big and with this much behind it, and so it was a very big deal. There were tons of butterflies. Everybody was very careful, very just kind of quiet, paying attention to every detail, making sure that if we see any problem that we stop everything. And so everybody was trying to make sure that everything was good, and the day was perfect, the winds were perfect, the weather was good, and so everything was lining up. For this flight, it was all manual controlled, and so it was very similar to any remote control piloted aircraft where he has a transmitter with his normal controls. What we're doing now is looking at all the data. It was an 8-minute flight, which isn't that long, but that's just tons of data, and so that's fantastic for engineers. We love that. So we get to look at everything to verify that everything worked the way it is supposed to, and everything looks good so far. So once we do that, then the next flights will just start to increase autonomy, and so we'll start turning the autopilot on and then verifying its functionality, and then eventually go over the horizon and beyond line of sight, and that'll be the next phase. The end result is the data for scientists, and that's really what's important and what it's all about, is that we get down to Antarctica, do some measurements with the radar system that was developed at KU, and get some really good data so that the scientists that are doing the modeling of these ice sheets can come up with better predictions to let people know how the melting of the ice sheets is going to affect sea level rise. That's really what it's all about. So that's our main focus, is that this airplane is fantastic, but it needs to provide something, and that data is what it's all about. When it actually got on the ground, there was a moment where when finally all 3 wheels were on the ground, that I knew that it was actually going to get stopped. It was still moving, but you were still nervous that it wasn't going to work. But you knew that it was done, and it was successful, and that was a very good feeling.